The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli, and I'm here with my good friend, Norm Francis. Norm, what's going on, man?
No, not much. Just trying to stay busy and stay out of trouble, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're able to make it.
Well, I'm glad you asked me. I was getting a phone call last night.
Well, you know what's funny is we just did, sequentially, we just did Sal, and then we went down and did Cheneth, and it just got me thinking about making sure that all the OGs get their moment in the sun, because I think there's a lot of kids now that they don't really know the history of off-road racing.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate because, like you and I've talked many times throughout our years, the minute any sport, any business, any family forgets their roots and how they got to where they are, they cease growing or they grow the wrong direction, at least in my opinion.
Sure.
Technology's changed so much, drivers' attitudes changed so much, manufacturing's changed different, and it's sometimes not good to forget how you got where you are.
100% I agree. You know, that's one cool thing. Like, you're our vintage class steward, so you're the guy that we send everybody to if they're interested at all in racing a vintage car. You know, just talk about, you know, your passion for those vintage vehicles. It's really cool.
There's nothing more gratifying than finding an old race car, finding the lineage and the heritage to it, finding who drove it, and then trying to get those same people back in out of their armchairs to come race the car again. Like what we did with KJ Hell a few years ago.
Yeah.
That was the most fun car build we did in 5 weeks. We get that 80-year-old man out there, and he had a grin on his face the entire week, and you couldn't ask for a better time.
Which, I mean, that's one of the things I absolutely love because, you know, yes, these are historical vehicles, but they're meant to be raced.
They were designed with 4 wheels and a steering wheel for one reason. As long as it's got a gas pedal, it should be pushed.
Yeah, 100%.
And I really believe in that.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, earlier you and I were just talking about how cool, you know, Nora resurrected vintage racing and really kind of lit a fire underneath it, and that spread to the Mint and some other races as well.
Well, Michael Perlman did a really, really neat thing, and he did a very good job of following what Ed did, what his pops did.
Yeah.
And I don't think vintage racing in any way, shape, or form would be at what it is right now had it not been for Mike. I mean, I know I did a lot trying to get it up here with Casey and you guys in the Mint years ago.
Yes.
But I probably wouldn't have never even thought about that had it not been for what Mike's vision was.
No, 100%. I give him all the credit in the world. I mean, we saw what was going on with Nora, and then, you know, going through all of the historical photos and video and seeing all these different radical vehicles that raced. And I mean, like sedans, RVs, tanks, you know, lots of different buggies, you know, it's really cool. And then also looking at how they, you know, all came up with different engineering, you know?
Well, I remember when my dad was first building race cars way back when we grew up in Hemet Science Center with the miners and, you know, Fricker and Hall and all those guys. And my dad started Vernon Roberts Racing, and in an old 6-cylinder inline Chevy buggy with a 2-speed power glide transmission. My dad was one of the first people out there with the independent Corvette rear suspension, this tube frame or square tube frame buggy. If something broke, let's 3/16 still ain't gonna work. Let's put some quarter-inch steel on it. We'll get to that damn finish line. And it's things like the heavier, the stronger. Well, now things have changed so much differently that it's all in angles, triangulation. They're getting the strength out of geometry instead of out of material.
Yes.
It's amazing what the sport has done.
Yeah. In fact, I had to wrap my head around it. I was looking at the Mason trucks and their lower trailing arm. They've used aluminum aircraft, which is insane. In my head, I'm like, oh, that's going to break, right? But the load that arm is taking, it's totally sustainable.
Well, exactly right. And look at the Formula Ones and Indy cars that are monocoques, all riveted aluminum chassis, and they're putting major horsepower, 200 some miles an hour torque and stuff in the corners and the body flex. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody doesn't come out with a single-seat monocoque in the near future with about 25 to 30 inches of travel, and it's probably going to weigh well under 3,000 pounds if they get the right engine package in it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, it's really cool to I was talking with Lynn Cheneth about that same idea, and, you know, I asked him, I said, well, are there any cars that you still want to build? And he's like, oh, yeah. You know, he's like, there's one that I want to build that I think will get everybody. He's like, beat the trophy trucks? I'm like, 100%. So it'd be really cool for somebody to build that. In fact, I was just talking to Jesse Jones, and Jesse is having Mason build a plunged rear axle. I mean, technically it's going to have a truck body on it,
right? But
it'll be 4-wheel drive plunged vehicle, right? So that'll be interesting to see.
And if they can get the right geometry on those things, they can get 45, 50 inches of wheel travel out of them.
That's crazy.
But then you have to worry about body roll. They have to worry about everything else that goes along with the right height and the wheel droop, everything else. It's so scientifically changed now from the type of cars that we're racing that it's totally mind-boggling. In other words, let's do this in kindergarten terms. We're driving first-grade cars. These guys are driving master degree cars. And the cars that we're racing were the best of the best at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just amazing how much has changed. Now, granted, the tracks have changed. The same dirt's been raced on for 50-some years.
Yeah, it's beat up.
So it's getting hard. And we take our cars out there, a lot more prep work in between races, but we're still not finding broken chassis and stuff like that. But we go through a lot more parts. But the cars are still capable. It's just that the technology now, these trophy trucks, I mean, we have a film of Tommy getting passed on the dry lake bed in that Class 1 Chenoweth of ours. He's doing about $114, $115. These guys are doing 170, 155.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and really now the only thing that's holding them back is airflow, right?
Yeah.
It's a big giant kite.
Yep. But also, along with all the great positives of it, it's also got some negatives on what the effects of the desert are.
Sure.
Bigger wheels, longer wheel travel. They're not hoop-de-doos anymore. They're all double jumps.
Giant, yeah. Well, so, besides cars, you also restore bikes. Like, is there a car or bike that you've restored that's like the one that you're just like, okay, that was my favorite one?
Believe it or not, it's my 1964 Yamaha YG180. When I was 64, I was 7? My dad brought home this Yamaha 80. I was really fortunate. My dad raced, my mom raced, my sister raced, my big brother raced, and I've been riding motorcycles since a very early age. And I come home from school one day. It was the Friday before Easter of '64. And there's a new Yamaha 80 set in the garage, and I go, "What's this for, Dad?" I always wanted a taco mini bike. And my dad said, "You're not getting no damn mini bike. They got too small of wheels. You'll kill yourself, like you'll shoot your eye out, kid." So anyway, come home from school one day, and there's a brand new blue Yamaha YG180 in the garage. And they're the old press frame ones.
Yep.
And my dad's and my big brother Ray's out there, and they're bobbing the fenders and done some things to it. And I go, "What's this for?" "Well, Mom's tired of her 125, so she wanted to go on an 80 like your sister has, so we went and got her one." Well, that's following Saturday night, the day before Easter. My dad's, "Hey, bring your helmet and gloves, and we're going racing tonight over at Elsinore, so bring your stuff, and you can bring Mom's new bike in." "Okay, no problem." About an hour later, he goes, "Hey, boy, grab your helmet, let's go." I go, "What?" He goes, "Your race is up in 3 races." I was so small, my dad had to hold the rear fender for me to leave the starting line.
Nice.
The old rubber band starts.
Yeah.
And that's how I started racing motorcycles. And I found a bike like that about a year ago, and I restored it back to as close as I could by the pictures I had my dad and big brother built me.
Yeah.
And it sets on my pool table at home.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, there's technology-wise, everything else, but sentimental-wise and memory-wise, that's
Right.
my favorite piece of machinery and two wheels.
No, that's super cool.
Yeah.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's Modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works Chassis Lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.
You know, like you said, the car that you guys restored, that KJ race,
Yeah.
that was that a Cheneth? What was
That was actually a high jumper.
a high jumper?
Yeah, and we did it. It was actually one of Du Temple's old cars.
Okay.
An old pre-runner of Du Temple's, and found it, brought it home, and I think we had 5 weeks to get it done. After you and I talked about putting KJ in, I think I had 5 weeks to build it.
Yeah.
And it turned out pretty good, and it was a fun car. In
Yeah.
fact, it belongs to a guy up north now that's supposed to be getting ready to vintage race with it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty cool. That's got to feel good when you restore a car and then, you know, somebody purchases it and keeps using it.
Yeah, it feels good for them because I always lose money.
Well,
You know?
the level of detail, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like you're super old school, you're a painter,
Yeah.
you know, so you're doing everything by hand. There's no wraps in these. There's no like,
Vintage race cars, I'm a firm believer. As you notice, our cars even run Aerocorrect Bilstein shocks. Bilstein's one of our sponsors. We don't run any of the big fancy stuff. I believe a vintage car should be Aerocorrect. I mean, it's close, not safety gear, but as long as you got a good fuel cell, good seat, safety belts, and all your fire equipment, I believe the rest of the race car should be as it was raced in that era.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of vintage race cars out there that have yet to be resurrected, you know?
There are so many cars out there that families have given grandkids or children and stuff, and they've turned them into play cars.
Sure.
And if there is a way to reach those people, and if vintage classes could be affordable for more people to come out, I think the vintage classes could really grow and grow. As long as the people with the big money, let's just use trophy truck type money, and they want to say, well, I got my granddaughter wants to race, I'm going to go throw all this big money at this vintage car. That's not what vintage racing is about. Vintage racing is about showing these young kids how the sport started, how these tough men and women, and we had some pretty good women back then driving,
Yeah.
but how these tough men and women could get these old pieces of iron with anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of travel around these desert courses with lights that never worked. You know, might as well have a flashlight out.
Yeah.
And these guys got there. They didn't have pumper parkers originally. They, you know, on GPS, and you know how I feel about GPS. It's the most damaging thing to off-road sport that ever happened.
Sure.
If you can't see it, you can't drive it.
Yeah.
You know, GPS has turned mediocre drivers into horrible drivers.
Right.
And but it's amazing what these cars can still do, and I think there's lots out there. It doesn't take a lot to get them going.
Right.
It just depends on how hard you mash on the long pedal.
Yeah.
You can make these cars go as far as you want it to, as long as you know how to control the long pedal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing, and, you know, it's kind of an open-ended question is, you know, I've had as much fun racing a Class 11 as I have racing the Class 7 or trophy truck, right? You know, and in fact, in some ways more because, you know, the field of people that you're racing against are just super passionate.
I consider those people garage racers. You know, they have most of them have sponsors, but it's not big money. They're living, a lot of these people live paycheck to paycheck. It's their passion, and anytime a person behind the wheel of a race car has the passion that they do, that's what the sport's about.
Yep, 100%.
You know, it takes a lot of money. Let me put it this way. When I sat back and look at everything I've done now throughout my years, my 5/1600 years, all those years I raced 5/1600s, drove Benny Canello's Class 2 car for a while. If I would have known what I know now, for what it cost me to go 5/1600 racing, I could have been driving a Class 1 car.
Right.
You know? It was just amazing, but I loved 1600s.
Yeah.
In Hemet, where I grew up, I was good friends with Rick Lee, which his father was the famous Dick Lee.
Right.
You know, Class 5, you know, Superman. And my very first Class 5 car was his last Old Glory red, white, and blue car that I traded Rick a Mako 250 motorcycle for this old race car that's sitting in the backyard. And I brought it home and I put it all back original, pan-wise and stuff that I could and turn into a 1600. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but
Sure.
I wanted a 1600. And
Yeah.
I had a blast, a big learning experience, but it was nice having people I could call in the Hemet area to say, hey, how do you do this, how do you do that? And I had a lot of help learning. Plus my dad was, God damn it, boy, you're going to go broke. God damn it, boy, you're going to go broke. But it's part of racing.
Yeah. Well, and so then what, after motorcycles, when did you get in a car?
77. I raced a Datsun with my buddy Jim McKay and Stan. God damn, I can't remember Stan's name.
A Datsun.
A Datsun. It was a little 710 or 720 pickup.
Yeah.
And we raced. We had a little shop. I was building my a 5/16 swing arm car at the time, and Jim said, "Hey, let's do the Datsun," and we went and did the San Felipe 250
In a Datsun.
in a Datsun. And you talk about Class 11s,
Yeah.
they're smoother than a Datsun.
I bet, man.
That Datsun beat the hell out of us.
That is so funny. I mean, and too, like, that's one of the things I love about the vintage class is it's what do you got? You know, like, again, I go through these photo archives and video archives of the Mint and other races, and it's like Volvos, you know, Datsun trucks, you know, all the first mini trucks, the Nissans, so on and so forth. It's just really cool to see how people would just take something and they were like, well, this is what we're working with. We're going to make it work and go and have a blast.
Well, and that's how the trophy trucks and the 1 cars and the 10 cars have gotten where they are today, because back then it was all experimental.
Yeah.
You know, each generation of racer and car builder takes the best technology there, and then they put their spin onto it. And you take somebody in there 25, 26 years old that's got some CAD experience now, and they can design the damn computer and right out of the box. For the most part, it's a workable race car.
Sure.
We had to take, okay, did this work? What broke? What broke? Oh, we got a crack here. Where do we have to gusset this up? So you might take a 5/600, let's just say it started at 1,500 pounds. By the time you really got it working raceable, you're at 1,900, 2,000 pounds.
Right.
Because it's a learning experience.
Yeah.
But then the next car you build gets better, lighter, and everything else, because you're not putting weld on top of weld.
Yeah, it's really interesting to, you know, talk about that chronological history, because again, we were sitting with Lynn and I was like, well, how did you get into this, right? Like, what made you think that you could build race cars, right? And, you know, more or less he explained it was a gradual thing. It wasn't like, haha, overnight we're building these badass race cars.
Right.
But it evolved, and it's cool to see, you know, to sit and talk with him and you know, go through the era of when it was him, and then it was Raceco, and then
Funco.
Funco. Yep,
It was
Funco.
Gil George.
Yep, Gil George was, you know, building a lot of race vehicles at the time, and then they moved into sand cars. So, but then, you know, it was funny because then Cheneth, you know, kind of ended, and because Thomas had passed, and
Right.
they'd sold the company, I believe, to some Israelis for military use. And then Jimco came up, you know, and Juleson, you know, really just started dominating, you know, Class 1. You know, and then eventually the trophy trucks took over, you know.
Yeah, and going back to the buggy thing, you had Dave Chrysler at Raceco, which you mentioned.
Yep.
And I'm a firm believer that in the late 80s, throughout the early to mid 80s to the early 90s, if you're racing Class 2 in a 2-seater,
Yeah.
if you were in Raceco, you really weren't that competitive.
Right.
Dave Chrysler, when I drove that car for Benny Canello with that Toyota motor in it, no matter what I hit, that car would land back on its wheels. I mean, I'd have these old crap moments, and my kids' mom was my co-driver at the time because she was like 110 pounds of nothing.
Right.
You know, and that's when it was always just right hand, left hand turn signals, and she was watching the mirrors and gauges, and the driver had to be the driver.
Sure.
And I was sometimes hitting things, and I'd think, oh my God, this one's gonna hurt, and that Raceco would land back on its wheels no matter what.
Yeah, it's, and then from that, you had this era where the McMillans were basically ruling, and then the Truggy shows up, and that changes everything.
Well, I think 86 or 87, Baja 1000, I was driving for Benny, and we were number 205. And that was the first year, I believe, I may be wrong, but I think that's the first year they allowed the Class 8 trucks to run in Class 2.
Right.
And it was 1, 2, and 8 were, if you 1 or 2, you could enter 8 in Class 2. And it was combined class. And it was those trucks and the fast stuff, when they started getting longer travel and stuff, they were a handful for buggies.
Yeah.
Walker hit me so hard in the forest in Benny's car. And it was on ABC Wire Sports that year.
Yep.
And they show, and it was Rob Ritchie and I, we had a 110-mile battle of the best battle. He was in an RCR car, that RCR plumbing car.
Yep.
And it was muddy. It was so muddy, in fact, we had to kick the windshield out because the motor kept getting hot. The mud was that bad.
Nice.
And we're having a blast. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm literally looking at every rock straight up and down. I'm looking down the front bumper. And I'm ready to go over. Walker's hood of his Dodge truck was underneath my race coat.
Oh, man.
He hit us so hard that it popped the rear spare, crushed the rear center line. No horn, no nothing, typical Walker. Come back and get over the side, and I go, well, okay. 'Cause I think we were either first or second physical, not on time, but physical.
Sure.
And that race car was running so good, and oh, what the hell's this? So I go pulling down over there, and I guess Scoop was right on his ass. And so about 10, 15 seconds later, I'm clearing the mirrors and everything else, trying to get my head back out of my ass, and get going back on the throttle. And I hear, boot, doot, doot, doot. And I pull over, and it's Scoop, and Scoop's co-driver, I can't remember his name, Scoop goes, I'm sorry, Norm, I saw it. I'm sorry. he saw exactly what Walker did to us. And, I mean, that was a eye-opener how fast those trucks were getting when they started changing the rear suspension of those things.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that evolution and know that, there's an era where, obviously buggies ruled, right? And then trophy trucks ended that era.
Well, it's really neat because, when Tommy was driving for us, and I got to drive a couple, my 5-link a few times when we got that put together. And we did Laughlin Blue Water. Parker Blue Water. And they got that one canyon back in there that you come back when you get out of Riverside Drive, you hang a left, go up, and you get in that real tight canyon. And they always race the vintage cars in the first race in the morning. And a lot of the trophy guys will enter that class for a sportsman class just to go, pre-run. And we'll take our little 40-some-year-old buggy, and in some of that tight canyon stuff, the nasty rocks, we can go blowing right by them.
Sure.
But you get anything where they can push the long pedal, man, we just got to cover our heads for the rocks.
Yeah.
They go by us so fast. But, yeah, in the real vast, rough, straight stuff, the trophy trucks are just, they're Formula One cars.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Out of the you're talking about the cars you build, are there cars out there that you're still hunting for? I know I talk to Rory about this all the time.
Well, I just sold Rory. I found Mark McMillan's first race car, the old high jump. It was a high jumper. Actually, before it was called high jumper, it was for San Fernando Buggy Center, and we found their first Class 9 car, and it was 7 miles from my house in Murrieta, in a guy's backyard.
Yeah. And
he's a welder at PRP, and he had, PRP is one of our big sponsors, so he said, hey, Norm, I got a buggy like this in my backyard. I go, what? He goes, yeah, it's got a white fiberglass body and a big faded blue M on the hood. I go, what? So his name's Norm also, so Norm sent me some pictures that night, and I said, what do you want for the thing? So anyway, I worked a deal with it and brought it home. It was just a partial rolling chassis, old swing arm car, but they still had the big M on the hood. Luckily, the hood was there. Had Mark's old sorority, what do you call it, emblem on it, everything. And we verified it. Mark verified it. That was his first 9 car. And in the big blue book is number 914 or 913. Nice. And I never got around to getting done with it. Just got tired of sitting on the side of my house. And so I worked out a deal with Rory and his buddy Cody Swanee.
Yep.
They're going to put it together.
Nice.
And it's going to be, but if I could find any one car I would probably want it to be Bob Rodine's mid-engine Jack in the Box or Casey Highlights Chenoweth. Bob Rodine had a mid-engine Chenoweth that was had a wing and stuff on it. Probably one of the most beautiful paint jobs that I've ever seen. And I think Rob Mueller did a paint job here in San Diego. And if I could find that car, I think it went to Australia. But that car is probably the most beautiful work of art that Lynn had ever built, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Way ahead of its time. Plus, Bob Rodine was just a hell of a, I mean, he was a wheelman like you never saw.
Right.
Very modest. Never was known for smashing people. Won a lot of races. Did really well in a lot of races. But his cars were always works of art. And when I first started restoring cars again, 10 years ago, I always had that paint job in the back of my mind.
Sure.
As the go-to, what my cars have to look like, that quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the vintage paint jobs, and one thing as a graphic designer that I cannot stand is a lot of the modern graphics, right? And we figured it out. It was like, why do people make them look like boats? And it's because our culture is also river people, right? So it's like the boat is painted in a certain way with scallops and stuff, and then they put that on their car and they think that that's cool. I hate it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Well, the old vintage race cars, all the single-seater and two-seaters, the side pods and noses are all long and kind of triangulated.
Yeah.
So panel painting, what I call panel design painting, works out really, really good. With good paint stripe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get the wrapping on the trophy trucks because, you know, what you're going to find out with your next guest is fiberglass gets destroyed every freaking race.
Yeah, totally.
To pay somebody like me or pay a good painter to paint a trophy truck body every time, hell, paint alone now, I'm paying $150 for a quart of white.
Right.
You know, with no hardeners, no base coats, no nothing. And to do a trophy truck the way I like to paint, it's going to cost somebody 20 grand.
Right.
And a wrap is what, 35 to 4 grand per race?
Yeah, no, I'm not advocating paint all trophy trucks, although...
Oh, it would be bitching.
Did you see Tavo's truck?
Yeah.
That was badass.
Yeah.
That was, you know, one of the coolest, you know, paint jobs ever. And I was telling him, like, we need to photo that, replicate it as a wrap so he can run that every time. But it's really cool. I just appreciate the effort, you know, that artistic part. And it goes back to really the hot rod roots of off-road racing, you know?
Well, also, too, is hot rodders, garage racers, they touch every part. They don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you look at how hot rodding started. They're innovators. They had to look at something, engineer it in their head. They didn't have drafting boards, and then sit there and whittle it out. And same thing with painting. You know, the first guys started using spray paint, they were using vacuums on backwards, putting paint in vacuums and put it on reverse motor, and they're spraying cars with vacuums.
Right.
But the thing is about painting is you touch the car.
Yeah.
I'm not using some soapy water and a squeegee and a sponge putting a film on a car.
Sure.
I'm laying a car out. First off, I have to do all the base coats. Then I have to put the body back on the car, lay all the stripes out, and I got to take it back off. I just did Darren Nessensary's car. I had four or 5 days to get it done before Nora. It was a 4-color paint job plus clear.
Right.
And I had 4 or 5 days before Nora for him to leave for Nora on a big race coat, 9 pieces, and I got it whipped out. But I'm thinking, why the fuck did I say I'm going to do this? Why the hell am I doing this? I'm over this shit. But when you start getting to it, you just know what the end result's going to be.
Yeah.
Where when wrapping, and I'm not saying anything against these art designers. These guys have things in their head that I never thought about when they design on a computer.
Sure.
But they get all the sponsor logos, all the stuff like that. But they're not touching the car.
No, it's a complete detachment. I mean, speaking as like a modern graphic designer, but also somebody who painted, you know, motorcycles and cars. It's like the physical aesthetic of touching it and understanding the dimensions and how it looks. And, you know, I'm a big fan of, you know, like a lot of the OG painters like Ed Roth, like Big Daddy, you know, and you know, lots of other guys. And they would really look at the vehicle and make the graphics flow so it looks like a race car. So it implies motion. It wasn't, what I see a lot of, which is this kind of blocky, to me it's ugly. It doesn't look like a race car.
Everything in the universe, if you take a long enough time, like that camera right there, if you look at it long enough, that camera will talk to you and tell you what looks good on it. Every car has a personality. And if you step back and look at it, it may take 10 or 15 minutes, and you'll run 5 or 6 ideas through your head mentally, and the car will talk to you, say, that's the one. And I'll take some blue tape out there, some 1/4 inch fine line, and I'll go out there and start laying it out. And generally it's pretty good the first time because you take your time. But if people who want to design their artwork and their race cars, make them really personal and do some neat things, if they just take their time and let the vehicle talk to them, it comes up pretty awesome. And there's one young man now doing it, and I shouldn't say young, he's not that, he's probably in his 50s. Tony Barraza.
Yeah, Tony's great.
Tony, when I was racing at the higher end level in the 70s, Tony used to watch me race, because we grew up with him together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that guy, I don't get to see him as much as I like to, but he's a good person that can look at a vehicle and let it talk to him.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I hate the fact he's not painting. I wish he was painting instead of wrapping, but his design studio is really, really good.
Well, I mean, I'm, I stopped painting when I was in my 20s and, started, doing more graphic design. And as the wrap technology came aboard and we started realizing like what we could do, it's like all evolution of technology.
Yeah.
It's a good thing and a bad thing because you give a bunch of people the tools. That doesn't mean they necessarily have the eye or the design skills.
Right.
Or like what you're talking about is effort, like not half-assing stuff and putting a bunch of clip art, on the side of $1 million truck. It's like, come on, guys, it's $1 million truck. Let's make it look like $1 million truck.
To me, it's putting personality to a vehicle.
Yes.
Okay? Okay, I'm going to piss off some people here when I say I talk about trophy trucks now. I don't care who builds a fucking trophy truck.
Right.
You line them all up, take all the body panels off, get away 50 feet away. They look like the same builder.
Sure.
They're following each other's ideas because they know what works.
Yep.
Okay, the technology works, the geometry works. It is what it is.
Right.
Okay? For the most part, what's the difference in shocks? They're all working the same. I don't care what the manufacturer say. They all got their selling points, but they all get the same job done. But the paint job that they put on the truck, or the shape of the fiberglass, is where the personality comes out. And if people step back and look at it, they can make the truck like nobody else is on the race course.
Right.
Remember Rough Rider, the Fords?
Oh, yeah.
They had the red, white, and blue. I call it the surfer stripe.
Yep.
Okay? They had their own personality.
Yeah.
Look at BF Goodrich, their red, white, and blues.
Yeah.
When I was racing by Yokohama, I came up with the Yokohama red, white, and blue slashes on all the cars we had. And back then we had personalities.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Chase, number 23, it's 2023, this championship's yours. Let's show these guys what's up.
Easy, boys, it's not over yet. Big dog still gotta eat.
Whatever you say, big dog.
Seriously? These fools think I'm fried?
They know the deal.
I mean, so out of the modern era of trophy trucks, what's your favorite one visually?
I would have to say, if you're looking at aesthetics down the racetrack, I would probably go with the blue and white King truck, Rain Fade. His mom and dad, they own that big quarries.
Oh, Voss. Yeah.
Jason Voss.
Yeah.
I like because it's actually got some lines that go with the.
Sure.
The blue and white goes with the body lines.
And you knew that's signature colors, right?
Yes.
You knew that was Voss coming anywhere, right?
And another one I really, really like for short course because it gets the job done for the business is, and he's in a rough shape right now, but all of our good friend Kyle LeDuc.
Sure.
That monster truck, just plain black, and you got the green in the right places. It sells the product. It shows how badass that truck is, which he's got the baddest ass four-wheeler out there, you know.
Yeah.
His truck, the paint job on that has a personality that says, "I'm coming to get your ass."
Sure.
Me and my big green on the side.
Yeah,
your ass is
Stilo
mine.
is what I think he calls that truck.
I just think Kyle's got people's number. That's an intimidating truck just by how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. For me, it's the Riviera truck, hands down.
Yeah.
Like, just it's got enough on it, you know, that it's cool.
Yeah.
And not overly done.
Yeah.
You know?
If I could lay out a trophy truck for somebody, one of the trucks, and Cody Swanee did a pretty good job with it not too long ago on his 8 truck. The Larry Minor Miller, the American Wheels Miller truck that Steve Kelly drove with the big star on the side.
Yeah.
That was thought after, and that was a good team effort because they're Class 6. Oldsmobile Kelly had the same paint job on it. Larry Minor always did a pretty good job with that. The Otter Pop truck that his son Chris drove, just white with Otter Pop in the that's kind of bullshit. But the Miller American trucks were pretty badass.
Yeah.
Another car that I thought looked really neat in the old days for just a plain old sedan in Class 6, which I'm sure you remember them, the Rambler Americans that James Gardner had.
Yeah. I mean, how do you make a sedan cool?
Exactly.
Right? He did it.
Yeah. Well, that blue and gold and white 442 Oldsmobile that James drove. Yeah. That Roger Subith and some guys built with just the big rally stripes down the hood, over the hood scoops, the gold stripes. That just gets you. It's a muscle car with fucking suspension.
Yeah. No, the one, it's funny because you talk about vehicles that, I don't know, were just magical. Like the one I was talking to Rory about this, and I don't know where it's at somewhere, right? It was the short course truck that Mickey built out of titanium, and I think there were only 2 built.
The Marine truck?
Yes.
The Marine truck, there was one of it, the Chevrolet Love Marine truck.
Yes.
Okay. There was one at the NHR Museum for a long time in Pomona.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the dark blue one. The dark blue Marine truck.
So the story I was told is when he got them in as a sponsor, part of the sponsorship deal was that they had to deliver one of the big containers to Weldon. Yeah. Right. And because welding titanium has to be in a chamber, you can't just weld it outside, right? So he threw that into the deal that they had to provide this, and the way story I heard was that there were 2 chassis built for that truck, and
From what I understand, if I remember correctly, and I was working for Mike Evans at this time. Right. Remember Mike Evans? Mm-hmm. One of the best engine builders. I don't think Mike's around anymore, but Mike Evans probably one of the best. I think he's 5 or 6 times score engine builder. Yeah. We were doing the Denny Merrill truck, the Canadian honker truck, which was the original Scoop Vessel 77 Ford Baja truck. Yep. Okay. And they had a short course Love and a desert Love. They were one of the first people to run the radiator in the back and stuff. Remember the big scoop above the roof? Yes. Okay. I don't know how well that worked because I'm not a very smart metallurgist, but we all know titanium doesn't flex, it snaps. Yeah. So I don't know if that was part of the problem in the long. But Mickey was such an innovator. Yeah. He'd throw things at the wall and just see if it stuck. Yeah. And he always had the money to just start a new project. Yeah. Like Rory's car. And by the way, we're all talking about Rory Ward guys. Yeah. Rory's Challenger cars. You look at these things and this is a freaking sprint car with long travel, man. Yeah. But you look at that thing and look what Mickey did with this technology. Yeah. He was on Mars when we were just trying to get to the next bathroom.
Well, and it's amazing too. Again, that speaks to the spirit of this culture of when you realize that Mickey built a land speed car in his garage and went and set the land speed record, more or less. I think it was their first attempt. They broke 400, right? I believe that's the story. And then, and then he went and raced in Indy that same year. Built the car in his garage and went and raced Indy.
And Lions drag strip.
Yeah. Yep. The Lions strip.
Majority. If you're in your 70s, 80s, and maybe late 60s, if you had any type of future in drag racing in Southern California, Mickey was a part of your life.
Definitely.
Lions Drag Strip.
Yeah.
You know, he helped more people race. And, well, you know, we all know our good friend Barbara Rainey.
Yeah.
She worked for Mickey for years as, I think, the secretary or something at the racetrack. And it's amazing how small this world is. But one thing Mickey did that I can tell you from my little bit of knowledge is he had people like Jack Krisman and a bunch of real good drag racing people.
Yeah.
That got involved with his land speed stuff and with his off-road stuff. These guys were just not hot rodders to go straight in a quarter mile. These guys had thought. They had ingenuity. They knew how to make something work, and it all worked out well for Mickey.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a really interesting cultural tipping point because, and I didn't realize that I was actually talking to Brian Chichua, and he brought it up, and he goes, well, you know why, you know, hot rod culture exploded in Southern California? And I'm like, well, I think it had a little bit to do with the weather and the fact that we don't have a winter, so people are doing stuff all year long, and you know, your cars don't rust away.
Yeah.
But you know, what he brought up that I'd never thought about was that the aerospace industry. So you have this mind share of people that are brilliant, and they come home and they're like looking at this car and they're like, I know how to make this go faster. You know, and it just created this explosion of not just innovation, but the idea that you could do this. I mean, what's incredible to me is that, you know, Mickey, was not a schooled engineer, you know,
right.
he was running a printing press before this, thought that, hey, I can go beat factories in multiple forms of racing and build a car in my garage. Like, that concept to me is incredible.
Well, he also had this uncanny knack. I think it started with Pontiac on the land speed stuff. I could be wrong, but I think Pontiac.
Yeah, I think it was Pontiac.
And then he had Ford Mustang with the door, the camera motors from Ford on his drag cars. I think he was one of the really first people. I could be wrong, but one of the very first innovative people in all of motorsports to get the factories involved in all the different genres of racing.
Yes.
Whether it be roundy round, drag racing, off road, you know, the guy just had this knack of being a salesman.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously his effect is still, you know, it's still echoing, it's still reverberating, you know, in the things that we do. I mean, we look at him as, you know, an example of a promoter, example of a vehicle builder, an engineer, shock tech, like all the different things that he did. But what I really like about him is that influence that he had with everybody else, because of him, because of other people as well, everybody was like, oh yeah, I can build shocks, I can build a race car, you know, like that ingenuity and that like concept of, you know, really American, like, hey, we can do anything.
Well, also too is, as much as competitive as I'm sure Mickey was, I only got to meet him a few times when I was racing the Mickey Thomas Grand Prix, plus I met him for my dad a couple times. But Mickey was a shrewd businessman in the fact that I really don't think he gave a shit about winning races. I think the land speed record thing we might hit, because his inventions, his innovations in the off-road were so far advanced that the cars broke a lot.
Yeah.
In other words, he was trying things everybody's afraid to try to do because he wanted to make technology better.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think the only race, in fact, I know it is, the only race that the Challenger ever won that Roy Ward's got is the one he won at the Mint.
Yeah.
When Ward driving it.
Yeah, which was really cool because let's talk about that. So that car, Mickey built that car. It came and raced the Mint and it broke. So he never finished the Mint in that car.
I don't think that car ever finished a race.
Yeah. And so Rory gets his hands on it. He restores it. And he wins his class.
It took me 2 years to talk Rory to come to the Mint.
Yeah.
He did not want to tear it up. I said, come on, have fun. No, Rory's just an old race car. Bring it out. Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to tear it up. Rory, you raced Nora, didn't you? Yeah. Well, come on out. It's not that bad. And he came out, and sure enough.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, it was really cool to put out that press release and say, you know, Mickey Thompson wins the Mint 400.
Well, if I remember right, you had it on a billboard at New York.
Yeah.
One of the light billboard things.
Yep.
And no, you guys have always done a really good thing for the vintage cars. what most people don't understand is it took me, almost a full year to get Casey to say yes, and I had to have you intervene with emails and stuff to get Casey folks to say yes to the Mint. And I'm not, no way, shape, or form, you know me, I'm not trying to take credit for it all, but like that, but I think vintage racing in the last 7 years in America has come a long ways in America.
100%.
Now, Michael Perlman he's the king of vintage in Baja, but he's never wanted to come to America. And I just believe that the average Mexican kid just sees, no disrespect to anybody out there, but the average Mexican kid down in Baja, he just sees race cars and loves them.
Yep.
He doesn't know the sport.
Yeah.
We have so many race teams up here. When we first did the very first Mint 400, remember we had all the cars lined up in front of Atomic.
Yep.
I had young men coming up that crewed for trophy trucks and crewed for Macmillan, stuff like that. He goes, "Oh man, I should love these things, this and that," and you know, I can't believe you guys, you run race these things. Because when we get them done now, they don't realize back then the builders had a little more class and a little more personality put in the race cars. There are more show cars, even though they're race cars. The paint jobs and stuff had a little more personality to them. They weren't cookie cutter cars, and these young kids really got into it and really loved it, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And you guys, Mad Media and stuff, is a huge part of that because you help push it along the whole way. But I just think that it's really good to get these cars back out of these people's barns because they're just going to rust away.
I think it's, you know, like, to me it's really important, you know, because it shows it's our culture, right? And it also shows everybody where all this stuff came from. It's like I was talking to Lynn Cheneth, and you know what I was trying to impress on him is, you know, I sat in a room with Polaris engineers, you know, and they're like, "Hey, look at this," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is a Class 1 car," and they're like, "Well, what's that?" You know, and so I think it's very important that we show, you know, the youth and everybody else where all this came from. All this technology came from off-road racing.
It's come full circle, Matt. All the stuff that we were playing with and building and testing and breaking in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s, they're just refining now with their new geometry systems and their new CAD cams and all the computers. They're just taking old ideas and making them new.
Racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, did you think, though, like, we'll talk about UTVs specifically, did you think that you would ever see the day where a guy could walk into a dealership and buy a race car?
You really want me to go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's the worst thing that ever happened to sport.
You think so?
Safety-wise, like we were talking earlier how much I hate GPSs. Everybody said, well, GPS is a safety issue. No, it's not. It turns you're driving what you can't see.
Sure.
Okay. UTVs, simple thing. You go in, finance a 50, 60, whatever it might be, 1,000. Remember, I used to be a Yamaha dealer. We sold a shit out of Rhinos.
Right.
And when this thing first started, and we get a young couple come in there. Yeah, I went to the race. I went to the Mint 400. I think I can do this. Really fine and dandy. But you have no. I can go to Glamis. I got my dune buggy. It ain't the same.
Right.
People think they can walk in a dealership, 50, 60, whatever, 1,000, put a roll cage on it and go racing. That's not racing. That's not what racing is about.
Sure.
You're a liability to yourself and everybody else on the course. You have no trail sense. You break an axle. Put the damn thing in four-wheel drive, get off the course. Get a flat tire, drag it off the course. Don't sit and change your course and your tire in the middle of the course.
Right.
And that's what's, in my opinion, that's what's bad about UTVs. Sure. Lack of experience for first-time racers.
Yeah.
And that's why I really like to see all the entities and promoters that put races on have a first-time racer class.
Sure.
I don't give a shit if you're a millionaire. I don't give a shit if you can drive a trophy truck. You're racing the first time, you're in this class.
Right.
You want to see what you can do before you turn you loose with the wolves.
Right. I don't necessarily disagree. You know, I think, though, that what I like about it is how many new people it's bringing in.
Great for growth.
Right.
Great for growth. But along with that growth, no matter what sport, look at surfing in the 60s.
100%.
When fiberglass came out, the beaches were destroyed.
Yeah.
Over, no wave etiquette, nothing else. Dirt bikes, and any Sunday came out in the 70s. Now we're talking my era. The desert got flooded right away. Everybody had to learn trail sense.
Yeah.
You give people a checkbook and a supposedly turnkey race car, they don't have the common sense yet.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, there's a lot of improvements that we can make and create, like, like we actually have a rookies class now that, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I've never raced before, we're like, cool, you're in the back, rear start. You're gonna sit down and have a little talking to by Kurt Leduc, and he's gonna square you away with some etiquette and teach people our culture. I mean, that's like, to your point, that's the challenge of UTVs is we've had, this incredible growth with UTVs, which is fantastic. But now when you go to certain riding areas, you're like, hey, this wasn't beat to death.
No.
So it's teaching them all the values of our culture, like that we don't trash the desert, we stay on the trail. We're not running around being assholes and blasting music and driving around drunk. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but I could tell you, like, from our experience in action sports, this happened to us, right? Remember rollerblading just blew up, right? And we were dumb kids. We were like, hey, screw these guys. We basically treated them like shit. And when the rollerblading fad was over, they all left with all their money.
Yeah.
And what would have been smarter is if we embraced them and said, look, we're going to teach you about skateboarding. We're going to bring you in to our culture, because this is not just a fad, it's a culture. And we'd still have all those people involved. And so that's kind of the way I look at UTVs is, it's the biggest opportunity that off-road culture has ever had. Now, we can screw it up or we can do it the right way. It's up to us.
I will agree with you on that point, but one other thing that could help if the manufacturers get behind a little bit more. And when I had my dealership, if you wanted to buy a quad from me and your child was of an X age, even Polaris, I had to give them a safety training course.
Sure.
Okay, so you'd be right. I'm a firm believer that there needs to be some type of training for UTV drivers, and I'm also, like you and I talked a little earlier today, in my day, with scoring stuff, you had to be 16 years old to get a racing license.
Right.
I'm a firm believer. You want to race at this level, even sportsman level, because you're out there at pros. And I don't give a crap what they say, whether it be sportsman or pro. The only difference is you're not racing for money.
Sure.
You're spending the same money in your race car. It's the same race course. You got the same chase crew. You're busting your ass. It's a professional sport.
Sure.
Maybe a hobby to some, but it's still a professional sport. I believe they should be 16 years. I don't give a shit who you are. I don't care who your dad is. You need to be 16 to race. Driver's license. Learner's permit or driver's license.
Right, in the big classes,
yes.
not the youth classes.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I mean, I kind of agree, although what we learned, and this goes back to Casey, is like, it was really, it's maturity, right? And it's a case-by-case basis, because some kids mature early, some kids don't.
And I get that.
So when we look at it, we're like, hey, how much experience has this kid had? Has he been racing since he was 6? What is his experience? And then we watch him and go, okay, this kid can hang or he can't. I being a kid that grew up racing and starting on bikes, I think it's really important to have the youth engage. But, I agree with you. There's a difference between youth racing and, adult racing, pressure-wise. And plus, you don't want to be that adult who gets tangled up with a kid. That's got to be the worst thing.
And this happened to me at Orange Show, racing a street stock, 6-cylinder street stock Chevy 2. Being a 13-year-old kid using your dad's name, sneaking into race, and putting somebody in the telephone poles in the infield, and the guy gets out, didn't realize I was 13, and smashed my face into the windshield. Nowadays, that's a huge lawsuit.
Yeah.
That's what I'd be worried about a promoter.
Yeah.
I put this guy in the inside telephone poles in this 6-cylinder Chevy. I literally just grabbed his left and spun his ass around. I knew what I was doing. I was doing an old motocross trick, just
sure.
Put him on the ground.
Yep.
Well, I didn't realize this guy's probably 220 pounds and is 50 years old. He got out whip my freaking ass.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that shit no more. I learned the hard way.
Yeah, that's called learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
you can't get away with that now.
It's amazing. You see this old fat guy crawl little side window in this old 6-cylinder car, and he comes running at you. You're trying to get the car started, you get out there, and it wouldn't freaking fire up. And next thing I know, his fist was about this big when it was 4 feet away. It's about this big when it hits your face.
Sure.
You know, you learn real quick how to show respect to these guys.
Oh yeah. No, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, so like for somebody who wants to get into off-road racing, you know, in specifically with vintage bikes or vintage cars, like what do you recommend the path?
Well, the paths are
Besides
the same, but they're
you.
totally different.
Right. Besides calling you.
I believe the motorcycle. I believe anybody that is a average motorcycle racer can then turn into a good car driver. I believe anybody that is a phenomenal motorcycle racer can be a phenomenal race car driver. They're the same, but they're totally different, but they're the same. It takes the same passion. It takes the same dedication. Race cars are 50 times more money. But motorcycling has grown also leaps and bounds, even in the motocross level with the kids' KTM 50s and all this stuff. Like what KTM does with the little electric bikes, the halftime shows of Supercross.
Yep.
That shows every 3, 4, 5-year-old watching TV and mom, hey, I can do that.
Yep.
We don't have that availability so much on TV with the kids' UTVs, the 170s and stuff, and 250s. But I think if you're gonna do it, good example. My granddaughter Abby. She's helped me with all my car builds. They moved to Tennessee a couple of years. Well, she just turned 12. She's out for the summer. I will be taking her this summer before she goes home to Tennessee in the end of July. She wouldn't know how to drive a car in a parking lot by then.
Yeah.
I believe the sooner you teach them how to drive a dune buggy or a side-by-side or something like that, and teach them trail sense, common sense, and safety. It's not always about passing the car in front of you. It's about knowing when to pass the car in front of you. It's knowing how to pass the car in front of you. It's knowing what to do after you pass the car.
Sure.
I think the sooner you can teach them in the desert, the better. So I think any parents out there, perfect example, Kobe Groom.
Yep.
His sons, they're phenomenal drivers. Even the little ones getting better and better. He started them out right. And also I believe to all the parents out there, if you want your kids to do any type of racing at all, no matter what school comes first.
Yep.
Because you can't work on a vehicle if you don't have math and science skills.
Yeah.
I believe if a child knows school has to come first, they'll become a better person and a better driver.
100%. That reward system. But, you know, besides youth, like, so a guy, you know, right now, he's like, cool, I want to buy a vintage car. I want to go racing. What is that path that you recommend?
I would buy. There's some nice running cars out there. You can do it two ways. Buy one that's drivable and raceable, and go hit some local races, and then And what's nice about the Mint, even though the course is getting rougher and rougher and rougher, they can go out there on their own pace.
Yeah.
And it's only a 2-lap race. Go out and do that. Nor is a big step to try and jump into the first time as a beginner, with money-wise and time-wise.
Sure.
But you'll never have more fun than Nora.
Yeah.
Okay. But I would think vintage car-wise, find somebody that's got a race car and tag around a race or two with them. See what it's all about.
Yeah.
Maybe ask them to go out in the bar store someplace and drive a little bit, and then invest in one. Start with a 2-seater, not a single-seater. I believe all people are getting into something. 2-seater is better. If something happens, you got some support out there. Also, you got somebody to share the bills with, and it's just more of a family fun. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be doing nothing but 2-seaters instead of single-seaters. But single-seaters just look badass. I'm sorry.
They're race cars.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, it's like the Indy car of off-road.
In my opinion, the Funko SS2, our first car we did the whole Mint thing with.
Yeah.
I believe that's the most sexy silhouette of all race car buggies, single-seat buggies in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
The low-slung silhouette that Gil George built. And then I'd say the next best car out there is a Chenoweth 1000.
Yeah.
Hand down.
I really, it's funny, and it's personal too, because, the Blurtons are friends of mine, and Phil had told me about this Aero car, and I finally got to see it down at Chenoweth, and it's big, wide stance, but like really long car.
Yep.
I can't remember what the wheelbase on it is, but it was big for that.
I think
era.
it's 120.
Yeah, I think it's 122, and I just think it's punk rock that the thing they were so confident it didn't have a spare.
Yep.
He's like, well, I'm either winning or losing. There is no in between. And that's a sexy car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. Lynn did, and I know you're good friends with Lynn, and Lynn and Gil George both, that generation of chassis builder, they were so innovative.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have nothing to go by.
Yeah.
And I think Gil took the chassis, and I think his chassis were probably the very first Funkos were probably one of the most copied chassis there were.
Yeah, I think so.
San Fernando Buggy copy, in which later came High Jumper, Berrien Buggy, Phoenix. A lot of people
dozens,
copied those chassis. Then Lynn's cars, I'm gonna say easily were 20-25% better than the Funkos.
Yeah.
Lynn came along a few years later.
Yeah.
And had the bugs worked out.
Yeah.
But also, Lynn had so many different chassis that were never really available to the public.
Yeah.
In testing. That little Mini Mag go-kart car.
Yeah.
That was one of the neatest. To me, that's the very first side-by-side.
Yeah.
Better as a single
it is. And it's funny because, like, again, Phil Blurton Sr. told me that part of that idea came from him using an engine from a snowmobile, right?
Yeah. And then they went to, I think, Yamaha 600s.
Yeah.
I think they went Yamaha 600cc sport bike motors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Lynn also had that big two-seat car, it's a big single-seat car that Bob Maynard and Rich Minga drove a couple times. That was a Yamaha powered car. And it was all-wheel drive with a motorcycle engine.
Yeah, but what's funny is Gil's impact, obviously his son is still running the company now and builds the most beautiful sand cars on the planet. I mean, what's funny is I was in Dubai, and when one of those cars rolls up from a mile away, you can tell that it's a Funko.
Yep.
Just beautiful.
And all those cars are painted.
Yeah.
Not wrapped.
Yeah, they still paint the cars.
Yes.
And he sells. It's funny because like I was hanging out with him. I don't know. It was probably a year ago. And, I'm like, hey, we should, do this. I'm a marketing guy, right? And he goes, Matt, I don't need any more marketing. I can't build more cars.
They're like 2 years behind, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really cool. I mean, hopefully, more people, buy those cars in the States, because I think the majority of them are going over to the Middle East, but their deserts there are just massive. They're perfect for it.
Well, their dunes will swallow up our entire Glamis.
I know. I've been there. I've been to both sides of it, the small dunes. And
well, not just that. They have the expendable income that American people don't.
Yeah.
And the American political statement or atmosphere and financial atmosphere right now is just not a real positive one.
No.
For racing and anything else.
Yeah.
People are just trying to eat.
Yep.
They're trying to get back and forth to work.
Well, I agree, but what was funny is in 2008 when everything fell apart, I was really worried. I was like, man, people are going to race if they can't eat? And we saw one of our biggest upticks in trophy trucks in particular during that era, and I realized that, like, this is pretty bulletproof. Like, and the difference is that this is not a show. This is a culture.
Yeah.
And like when you're an off-roader, you're an off-roader.
Well,
it doesn't go away.
Not just that. You go to the desert, all the bullshit of your life stays at home.
100%.
You're concentrating on doing something else. You're with the different. You have your family.
Yeah.
Then you have your racer family.
Yeah.
And the racer family lets you forget about the negatives in the house.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but like I literally need it like a drug, right? Like I have to go get in a car and spend hours driving it because it's zen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I come back and I'm like, I'm like a kid again. I'm all happy no matter what's going on in my life.
I do that on my I have a big Indian road bike now, and I got rid of all my Harleys, got me an Indian, and since I've been riding since '64, it's probably the most finest. That's a Polaris product. Probably the finest motorcycle I've ever thrown a leg over for the road. Doesn't do anything great, but it does everything pretty fucking good.
Nice.
You know, and but I do the same thing there. I'll just go out in the garage and look at the cars or the bikes when I'm working on. But what I wanted to tell you earlier, going back to racing, what it means to go racing versus paying bills. My kids' mom and mine, we were doing the 5-600 days. I can tell you, especially for the Baja 1000, because Baja 1000 is always 3 times what a state race is.
Sure.
Almost every year, it used to always be on the first weekend of November, which my birthday's on November 7th. It was always my birthday present. I can remember at least 5 or 6 times not paying the house payment the first of the month, so we go racing and come back hoping you have enough cash or you do good enough to pay for it. And we always got through it. But I remember many times not paying my house mortgage, so I'd go pay an entry fee.
That's racing.
That's racing.
Nice.
You know, that's what this whole sport is about. And there wasn't a big credit cards back then. Hell, I remember I got my first real MasterCard that said MasterCard on it.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do with this thing? I mean, I can buy stuff and not pay for it now?
Yeah.
And I got in trouble a couple of times on race car parts for that. So, no, it's these kids now just need to take a step back. Here's one thing I wish they would do. Now we're going to talk about motorcycles for a second. I have a lot of friends a lot of my friends now are in their 20s and 30s. I have like Cody Schock and stuff. So he's like a son to me. He rides for Phoenix Honda, top 10 250 Supercross rider. When he had his knee rebuilt last year after his bad crash at Arlington, he stayed at my house, or he lived in his own place, but he's about a mile away, so he'd be at my house every day. We got him in to restore in a 1976 CR250 Honda. That kid was sat there with his leg all wrapped up. He sat there with the polisher or the sand bead blaster. And my partner in restoring all these bikes now is Gary Chaplin, first American factory Mako rider. Many times first American against the Europeans in the late 60s or 70s. Guy's just a wealth of knowledge in motorcycles. So we teamed up to restore all these bikes. And Cody's sitting there, hey, what was this road trip like? Can you tell me? I mean, he's a sponge. And now he's got like 3 vintage bikes he's done. We're passing it on, you know. But the neat thing about it is he gets it. He understands. He's got the passion. What we don't race for money, we race to race. We throw a leg over our dirt bike or we strap our seatbelt on our race car. It's not, because in reality, that's not what we do. That's who we are. You know? And if more people would learn to work to live, not live to work, their lives would be a lot better. And I'm a firm believer, like with these young kids now, they're getting inducted into like the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame. I believe that they should be given a book with a little bit of history of every person already in that Hall of Fame. They should have to almost not really be tested, but they need to appreciate how the hell they got where they are. They need to be taught. I mean, like all these young off-road kids, if they would take Macmillan's Big Blue Book and sit down and read this thing, like not wrong term, but actually read it religiously, they might learn how we got here. There's families like them. There's people like Benny Canella. Ivan Stewart came from a freaking fence company. What, got second in his first race because somebody broke his arm and they asked him to drive? They need to learn how this happened. It just didn't happen overnight. You just didn't go buy a, you know, what $500,000 or $250,000 trophy truck, a used one, and go race. It had to start somewhere. You know, like years ago when Lin Chen, what's name was brought up one time, and I got to be careful what I say here, but in this one meeting it was mentioned, well, how, you know, why is he so important to the sport? Guys, there wasn't things for him to copy.
Yeah.
He had to reach an idea out of his brain, out of the sky, and make it happen. He had to take pieces of tubing and a bender and whatever he thought in his brain and a piece of pencil wrote down. That's where this started.
Yep.
They need to know his passion and everything else, how he got there. Same thing with Gil George. Gil George was doing after work hours welding in the back of Hooker Headers in Corona.
Yeah.
He had a little shop in the back of Hooker Headers his first race car chassis were built back there.
Yeah.
These kids need to know that.
Yep.
But nobody wants to take the time. Sometimes this generation is too much me. Look what I can do. Instead of, hey, maybe I better figure out how I got to where I am so I can be a better me.
I mean, I think that's up to us. That's our responsibility, is to make sure that, you know, kids coming up learn the culture, and we put it forward, you know, so that it's part, you know, that's why the vintage racing is so important to us, is like, this is our culture, right? We should be proud of it. We should be proud that the innovation and the spirit and all the things that built this culture, you know, and made it so great, you know.
Well, here's a family story that I can remember. My dad was so much about this stuff. My mom was pregnant with me, I think around the 7-month mark. My dad did roundy round dirt track racing at Lakeside Speedway in Kansas City, because I was born in Kansas City, Kansas. And there was a big racetrack back there called Lakeside Speedway. Yep. And my dad drove for a few different people. We didn't have a lot of money, but my dad would drive for a few different people. And my big brother, my big sister, which is oldest, my brother, which is 5 years older, then my mom was there with me pregnant in her belly, and my dad drove up over the back wheel of the car, went over in 3 or 4 times, and the car blew up on fire. And luckily my dad got out. And my dad never got back in a race car for a while. Well, then we moved to California, and my dad always had motorcycle and started dirt bike riding, you know, like Greenhorn Enduro and shit like that. And we always did desert riding, desert racing. And he starts hanging out with Herman Bowie, Larry Minor, and some of the other guys in Hemet. Next thing I know, he's building a freaking dune buggy type race car, that 6-cylinder Chevy, in the freaking driveway with a stick welder. And he was a line mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership. He did a lot of testing on the early Corvettes, and somehow this so-called warranty 6-cylinder Chevy motor shows up. This warranted Power Glide transmission. I mean, I think Chevrolet paid for this whole car unbeknownst to them during warranty parts, you know. Sure. And they went down, and him and Vern Roberts had a great time doing it. And I remember one night, my mom, and my family's gonna be pissed when I say this, but I remember one night my dad came in and said they're gonna go racing in a couple weeks like that, and it got a big giant argument. And I remember my mom throwing a plate of spaghetti against the wall. God damn it, Buzz, you're not going racing. He went, I gotta go work in the race car. Plate of spaghetti goes right past my head against the wall. My mom was so mad. They went out to race this race in Palm Springs, and I think they actually got 3rd place, and they made enough money. I think it was a God damn it, anyway.
And what area was it?
It's Palm Springs. They used to have races in Palm Springs.
Okay.
You know where the Volkswagen is? It looks like a big spider.
Yeah.
On Indian Avenue.
Yeah.
Right. That was the start-finish line. Okay. And anyway, they made enough money, and remember my mom.
That wasn't FUD?
No, it wasn't FUD.
Okay.
No, it was before FUD. Okay. We're talking 71, 72. Right. And I remember my mom saying, "Oh, okay, I guess maybe you can race for a while." But it was really funny because that's what passion we were growing up with. Yeah. My little brother was born in Escondido in '63. Yeah. My mom came home from the hospital. 2 weeks later, we were at Alcatia Wells. Now it'd be child abuse. My dad always wore a 650 Triumph in the desert, old desert sled. Yeah. Army fatigue jacket. And my little brother's wrapped up in a baby blanket, stuck in there, buttoned up, going through all-day desert rides. That's awesome. Like 4 or 5 days old. Yeah. That's how we were raised.
That's right.
You know?
Well, on that note, I think we're good, man. Okay. That was awesome. I really appreciate it. Great having you here. Always good just chatting with you.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you.
All right.